Good day, everybody. This is Rob Mazak. This is Monday, March 18th, in the evening time. Work is done, workout is done. Let's sit down and have a little conversation with everybody. And I wanted to spend some time tonight talking about trusting our intuition. Now, I can tell you that sounds really easy. But you'd be amazed how difficult it really is to trust information that you get that's not somebody saying it to you, somebody, reading it, watching a video, reading a book. It's one thing to get something that kind of pops into your mind, if you will, that gut feeling, just something you know. Most of us, I can tell you, disregard that and end up making decisions that are not necessarily the right ones. I guess the question would be first asked is, where does intuition come from? Well, intuition can come from a lot of places. It can come from the quote-unquote spiritual realm. It can come just from the fact that we're energy beings and we're simply immersed in this soup of cosmic information, the cosmic internet, and we are perpetually connected to everything there is already. But, we don't always have a streaming amount of information, at least that we pay attention to. I mean, that's a little bit like the internet, right? Because just because you can go on the internet and find anything you want, I mean, really just about anything you want, you can find it. You don't always have the internet on, always looking at it, always seeking information. But when you do seek it, it shows up. So in a lot of ways, I look at that with what we're talking about with intuition. Because when we are really seeking an answer or seeking some kind of resolution, or even if we're about to make a choice and we're not really seeking an answer, but you just get that feeling. You just get that feeling and you just know you should or you shouldn't do something that you're about to do. And how many times have we not listened to that and it's been the wrong thing to do, right? So we're not always connected consciously. I believe we're always connected subconsciously. In my experience doing hypnosis and connecting people to the other side, if you will, to the creator, to guides, and many other different ways of connecting the subconscious to outside this world, what I've found is that it really is the subconscious that is the seat of who we are. It is that internet hub. It is that wireless internet box that we have in our house. It's the same thing as in our head. When you really quiet the mind, or I should say quiet the conscious mind, because the subconscious mind never turns off, then you can begin to really connect with that information that's available all the time, every day, every minute, every way. But we're just not taking the time, for the most part, to really dial in and find that frequency for the information we're looking for. But even if we don't do it on purpose and we're trying to really find an answer, get an answer to our question, like, should I take this job or this job? Should I go to this school or should I go to this school or should I not go to school? All these things are, it'd be nice to know what the right thing to do is. And the funny thing is that the right answers are out there. They are always out there. I'm not saying that our lives are written in stone. What I'm saying is that you can find the answers you seek. You can find the information you're looking for simply by learning how to connect your subconscious. And most of that is done through meditation. However, let's kind of backtrack a little bit. So intuition. Intuition can be described as a lot of different things. There's a lot of fancy names for it. There's a lot of fancy definitions. But it really, to me, it's a knowing. And for example, when I'm working with a client and, we're doing a psychic or a mediumship reading or doing tarot cards or whatever, and I get information for a client and you get that look and you're like, how did you know that? I've never told anybody that. And the answer that comes out of my mouth almost every time is, I really don't know. There's no real mechanical process for how I know these things. I just have learned to really, I would say in a nutshell, learn to trust what I get. Because I can tell you when you first start realizing you get information that is outside of yourself and you don't know how you got it, it's very difficult to trust that. It feels like you are making it up, like it's something that's just your wild imagination, and it can't possibly be true because you're not seeing it, hearing it, smelling it, tasting it, whatever, although some of us do. But the point is that it's not your classic validation or information stream. But the interesting part is, I'm going to kind of tail off a little bit here, is that even if we don't do it on purpose in our awakening state, guess where it happens? It will happen at night when we're sleeping, in our dreams. Because what really stops us from that ultimate connection that our subconscious has with all there is, all there was, and all there shall be, I'm sure you've all have heard that before, right? Where time does not make any difference, right? Time all happens at the same time on the other side, if you will. So what stops us, though, is our conscious mind, which is only about 5 to 10% of the activity of our mind. The lion's share of the activity in our mind is our subconscious or unconscious, the part that we don't necessarily have direct access to, or we don't directly control it. Like our conscious mind, we can forcefully stop it from wandering and pay attention to the teacher in class and or what our spouses are saying to us, which we all need a little help with that, right? But anyway, point being that we can control that, right? It's sort of like if you wanted another analogy, let's think about breathing, right? So breathing happens all by itself. You don't have to think about it. But if you feel like breathing in and out, you can do it on purpose. That's kind of like the conscious mind and the subconscious, where in the background, it's always working. Your mind is always working, connecting, seeking, trying to find answers, trying to get information, just like your computer does hooked up to the internet. You don't have to be looking at it for it to be doing it, right? But it's the same kind of thing. And so information does come to us in a lot of ways. Sometimes we have a feeling, like when I first realized I was connecting with spirits or the other side, I could feel that it was happening. Like my skin would not vibrate, but tingle, right? It's just, if I had hair on my head, it would stand up, right? That kind of thing. And I knew they were there, but I couldn't really communicate with them. And it was a little frustrating because, sometimes we have to, if we want to learn to do that, we have to learn to do that. Other people are born that way and it's automatic. But, if you're trying to do it on purpose, like now I'm a professional intuitive, but I had to really put my mind to it and learn to connect and do it on purpose. And we tell you, it didn't happen overnight, right? But, and then And other times people can see spirits or the other side or things happening. They get a little glimpses in their mind of something that might be about to happen, and then guess what? It does happen. Deja vu is a perfect example. Deja vu is really a memory of something you've seen before, which, in my opinion, is God or the source or the other side. They basically have shown you that little snippet of something a while back, and you're just now experiencing it. And to me, that is a perfect example of connection to the other side and validation. So if you've ever had deja vu, and you've been somewhere, you've known that what's happening in front of you has happened before, you've just validated yourself. Think about that, right? Let's see. Other people can hear information. They can hear sounds. They can hear like high-pitched noises in their ears, tones, things like that. There's a ton of ways for you to realize that you are communicating, or you're being communicated to by the other side. I'll just use that. That's easier description, the other side. Through your senses, right? We'll circle back around to dreams here in a little bit, right? But a little bit about how I got to this point where it's really easy for me, if you will, to connect with, on purpose, in real time, with somebody sitting in front of me asking me questions. It wasn't always that way, right? So I grew up in a religious commune, religious cult, very much like the Jim Jones deal, without the Kool-Aid. Same leadership, interestingly enough, when I did some research. But, I realized as a kid, I've had this connection with the spiritual world or the other side my whole life. I didn't quite entirely understand what I was doing or what I was getting, but it was there. And I have been validated a lot throughout my life, but not enough to really 100% completely put my trust in what I was getting. But I can tell you, when you spend your whole childhood in a religious cult like that, and you have experiences like that, you doggone sure do not talk about it. If you do, you've got to put it in different words. Well, I think I saw a demon, or the devil showed up, or the Holy Ghost showed up and told me this. And I'm not saying that that's bad or good. I'm just saying sometimes you are not necessarily free to express your intuition. I think a lot of us find ourselves in that situation. I mean, can you imagine being at work and you get some kind of information about your boss that's not so good, and you just can't seem to let that thought go, or that feeling go, or that sensation go, and you should say something, but at the same time you really need your job. And if you go up there, you're and tell your boss some off the wall thing that may or may not come true, might consider you a whack job, and you may end up not having a job. And so I understand. I've been there. I have done that. I completely get it. I'm in the military right now, and there's some people you can talk to about it, but there's some that just didn't know. It's not happening, right? Especially your supervisors, unless you can figure out that they're open to it. However, and so I continue to get validation and to dabble into what I now know after I've learned to meditate on purpose, that I was connecting through meditation most of my life. I just didn't know what that was. And I was getting some of the craziest information, and I was dabbling in telepathy, which I actually have great examples of, but we'll talk about that some other time. But still, being in the military for, 29 years now, but, 20 years active duty, relationships that I had throughout those times, I was not open very often to talk about these things, right? And it is really hard to develop a trust in your intuition if you can't talk with other people that don't think you're crazy. So, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Because I'm sure many of you have had just the craziest experiences ever. And if you try to talk to your friends and family, they're gonna want to put you in a psych unit. And that's what most people feel good about when they come talk to somebody like myself, who basically validates that they're normal, at least in my world, right? And that they're not really crazy, and that there are other people out here having the same things. But to be honest, the real beginning for me developing my intuition and all the gifts that I have now was when my first relationship of 26 years suddenly came to an end. Well, it was coming to an end and I just wasn't paying attention. However, when it really did end, I went on a personal journey that was so intense that, for 9 months, every second of the day, I was meditating. Every spare second I had, I was connecting. I was understanding dreams. I was just on and on and on and on, right? And I just learned so much about connecting with the other side and getting spirit guides and through dreams and developing a relationship with my first recognized spirit guide. Not my first one, I'm sure, but I got validated so much with information from the other side and things I would ask for or ask about rather. And even then, though, I was still very tentative to talk to people. Well, I knew that I could help people with things by getting information from the other side through various means, but it was very scary, and I hear this all the time. I heard this from somebody the other day when I was working with, I said, why aren't you doing that? Well, it's not good enough. I'm like, well, maybe it is. It took a mentor or my mentor telling me in no uncertain terms that I need to trust what I get. She told me, she said, it feels like you're making it up. I get it. Feels like you're making up a story in your mind, but you are not. It is not your job to judge the information. It is your job to relay it. And if you can make sense out of it, or the client can make sense out of it, great. It might mean something now, but it will always mean something in time if it doesn't mean anything now. And I have lots of examples of that, which once again, we're not going to put into a half an hour podcast per se, right? And so I'm not saying that I came out of the box 100%. It took time. I learned I really began to learn how to listen first of all, and to hear what I needed to be doing. My mentor once again gave me my first job when she realized I was doing mediumship work. The stories I would tell her and talk to her about. She goes, I'm going to give you your first assignment. You need to go back. The next time I see you, I want to have a report on your conversation with your wife's ex, so that they both can get resolution. And so I went back, and me and the wife sat down, and we had. It was a crazy experience. First time I've ever communicated with somebody, at least that I can remember, wholeheartedly on purpose from the other side. Well, it turned out that he was on the other side. And so that's something we learned as well. And I was totally validated once again. And then it wasn't long after that I heard the next direction. You need to learn Reiki. I have no idea what Reiki is. I've never heard of that in my whole life. I had to go research it, and I'm like, all right. So I went and took all 3 classes, all the levels, and became a Reiki master, and and still, even with all that formal training, I was getting things and feeling things working with clients that I didn't understand. And I didn't trust myself enough to say things, even though as you hear in this story, I've been validated so much, but it still felt really difficult for me to tell clients things that I was finding. And so I was told by my spirit guide that you need to start talking your way through Reiki. You are not going to be the guy with the crystals and the smoke and the music. You are going to be the guy that's going to end up telling them all about themselves based on the energetic signature of every area of the body. I'm like, okay, cool. And that still was scary too. But I just, nowadays it's like I've learned so much about the human body. It's crazy. You can put my hands on or over or near people, and it can tell almost everything about somebody, about what's going on in their life, but that took time. And now I'm pretty comfortable with sharing stuff there, right? But still, my psychic and my mediumship abilities were developing, yes, but I still was kind of one of those closet readers, if you will. Somebody wanted to connect with somebody that had died. Somebody needed some answers. Somebody needed something that required me to connect to the other side. And so I would get the information. I would go meditate at home or somewhere else. I would get the information. I would usually I would email it or text it to them. And then, of course, everything that I got, almost everything I got, was completely validated. Yet, here I was still completely nervous, if you will, to actually be face to face with somebody and tell them what I was getting, because I was like, what if I'm wrong? I hear that a lot from my clients. I'm like, what if I'm wrong? My answer these days is, what if you're right? Like I said, our job is not to judge the information, just to put it out. Then I was called to learn hypnosis, and I did that, and I learned a lot of things about the conscious and subconscious and connecting people to the other side and getting pure information. I'm like, wow. I still was kind of that closet reader, if you will. And I had a lot of my psychic friends, mediumship friends, that would try to force me into doing fairs and things like that. And I had a hard time with that. I did start doing fairs, doing Reiki, but I never really did readings. Never really had somebody come sit down across from the table for me and go, all right, I want to connect to Aunt Susie. What can you tell me? Here's what I'm hoping to find, blah, 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 right? I just couldn't find myself comfortable doing it, even though I had trusted myself, but apparently it wasn't enough, right? My spirit guide at the time, finally got really fed up with me. It was almost like, I remember the night like it was yesterday. One night I got overwhelmed with, I think at the time I was working with 4 different spirit guides. Every one of them popped in. I say popped in. Most what I do happens in my mind's eye. They all popped in, and they basically said, you're going to sit down and we're going to have a conversation. And they would not leave me alone until I sat down and we had a conversation. And they said, that opportunity you have to work at this particular metaphysical store that, they've been trying to get you over there, you're going to do that. You are going to do that, and you are going to learn to trust yourself. And it was like, wow, okay. I know from past experience with my spirit guides that if I don't listen, I'll eventually get hit with a really big spiritual hammer. And I don't like those anymore. I did what they asked. I signed up and I started going, accepting customers, doing face-to-face. I remember the first time I did one. Oh my gosh, I was so nervous. But you know, the funny thing is, I found it to be even better than doing it in the closet somewhere and doing it separate from the client. What I found was that my ability to read people's energy and their body language and all of that accentuated any kind of reading I was doing. So I was doing psychic readings, mediumship readings, Reiki and stuff there. And I really finally started to get comfortable. But you know, there was always something that wasn't comfortable. There always is, right? It was that I felt like I could read the tarot cards pretty doggone well, or at least well enough to do readings and feel comfortable, you know, with that money exchange for that. But I just couldn't seem to get myself to do it. Every time somebody walked in the store and I was the only reader of the day or whatever, I mean, I kept getting these questions. Do you read the cards? 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 You know, I kept saying, no, I don't, you know, and finally, you know, somebody asked me that question and I heard my spirit guide says, you better say yes. So I told a client, I said, yes, actually I do. And I did my first card reading, you know, face to face with somebody. And oh my gosh, it was like tremendously accurate and wonderful and validating. And, you know, after I was done, I'm like, why the hell did I wait so long to do all these things? You know, that self-confidence is difficult to build. And so I'm trying to give you guys some encouragement out there, because even those of us that do this for a living, if you will, I mean, I'm deployed with the military now, but you get my point. When I'm not doing this, I do that full time. And so I do this when I can now. Even those of us that are professionals, if you will, we sucked when we started. It's just the way it is. And you have to learn. You just have to trust and step out and follow the path that your intuition is giving you, your spirit guides, however you get your information. You'll find it very rewarding and very exceptional to help people and to see the change in your clients as you go through a session, seeing them months later, a year later, sometimes even 3 years later. I've had some recently. 3 years ago they showed up and they still wanted to connect, you know, because of the readings I've done before. And seeing how much they've grown since you've first worked with them. I'm not saying I get the credit. My goal is to help people understand all the different ways to look at things, right? And remember, you don't have to be fancy. You don't have to be fancy. You don't have to have all the right words. You don't have to have everything perfect. Sometimes it's one word, one phrase, one thing that you say in your session that will change somebody's life forever. I remember when one of my children was going through a lot of relationship problems, and we had conversation about this one situation for days and days, right? But you know what really got her to change that whole dynamic and to finally separate and move on was one phrase I said. I said, you know, that man is trying to put a corral around the wild pony. And that's what she remembered. That's the only thing she really took with her out of all them days of conversation. So, once again, you don't have to have everything perfect, people. Please don't. You know, if you're trying to be perfect before you start, you may never start. Because even as much experience as I've had now, it's not always 100%. But that's okay. You know, as long as you're helping people learn to get out of their own way, that's the goal, right? So, To summarize, guys, if you're getting information and you're feeling things and you're knowing things and you don't know how, that's okay. Begin to listen to what you're getting. Seek out validation. And even if you're practicing with friends or pulling up pictures of celebrities and doing reading on them on the picture, and then going back and look at the history and see what you get. I mean, there's so many ways to get validated. You don't have to pay somebody a lot of money to learn this. You can do it. Anyway, I'm not saying everybody is called to do this. I'm saying everybody has the gifts. Everybody has a methodology, a pathway to connect to everything there is. Everything there is. If you choose to, you can become a very wonderful tool to help people in this world. Even yourself. Begin by helping yourself, of course, right? Anyway, I would like to digress here and say, trust your intuition. You feel like you're making it up, but you're not. Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. You can find my contact information on my website at lifebymazak.com, lifebymazak.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and you will hear from me again.